Welcome everybody to the Noun Square for a special time. Today's topic is private voting and Nouns DAO. Just going to spend enough. If you don't mind retweeting the room, it helps a lot to get the tweet out there so people see what's happening here and join. So we'll just listen to some music here for another couple minutes and then get right into it with our guests today. Thanks everybody for coming. Welcome again. Thank you everybody for coming. House of Nouns, I believe we've got Christian on the account. Is that correct?
Hello. How's it going? Yep, it's me.
Hey, Christian, welcome. I'm going to hand it over to you in just a moment. Just wanted to thank our panel for making the time to come together today to talk about this important topic. We have Nouner, Noun 40. We have one of the founders of Nouns, Nouner Dev Carrot. We have Elad from the Verbs team and Digital Oil. Thank you all for being here today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I'm happy that we're able to put this together, and I'm super excited to talk about it. It's kind of tough. It's kind of tough to decide where to start, but I feel like the best place to start is probably with the prop itself, right? Which is pass. But anyone have any first points they want to throw out there before we just jump into some questions?
Might be good to go to Elad first, and maybe he can talk a little bit about the thinking behind the prop because Verbs did sponsor that, and maybe go from there.
Yeah, probably a good place to start.
Elad, are you there?
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
It feels a bit choppy
go ahead,
for me. Anyway, let me know if it's problematic. Well, there has been interest. I'll say personally, there has been interest for me in private voting for a very long time now. Ever since receiving a delegate myself and just making friends in the DAO and kind of talking to people about how they think about voting, etc., it became pretty clear to me that public voting causes people to be cautious and to be thinking about what their vote looks like to other people, to their friends, to larger voting blocks who might hold their fates in their hands later on. Some time passed since that initial interest, and more people in the DAO started talking about it and mentioning that they thought it was interesting, including Noun 40, who is here, who has been a tremendous supporter of this proposal, as well as Digital Oil. As we were coming up to our renewing our engagement with the DAO, we mentioned private voting in the list of things we wanted to tackle. And then shortly after, through a conversation with Noun 40, kind of gave us the spark, the energy to say, okay, let's go for it and let's do it this way. Let's solicit the best ZK minds we can get in the world to first be aware of Nouns DAO and help us just get a better understanding of how it could work. After some quick conversations with Lakshman and the Personi Labs team behind Hey Noun and a few other teams, it seemed that there isn't a solution out there that could work for Nouns, and so we wanted to just explore that territory. As has been said a bunch of times around this proposal, there was never an intention for this proposal, at least from our end, to be a proposal such that it whoever votes for it is also saying that private voting necessarily should be deployed for Nouns DAO. It's more pure research to just discover the possibilities, and certainly with some interest on our part to potentially experiment with private voting with Nouns DAO, potentially, gradually see how it goes, plan certain experiments, but at least make it available on the shelf for us to be able to say, okay, let's use it now. Kind of that's the intention, and what we're hoping to see happening is amazing zero knowledge researchers and implementers from around the world becoming aware of this proposal, submitting an application, and just to have a fantastic 3-month sprint where they do the research and we communicate with them, and the DAO feels like there are some amazing people that have joined the Nouniverse, have become Noun Pilled, and let's take it from there. Let's see what they bring up through this proposal and afterwards, just very excited for all the learnings that will come of it.
I think that was a great explanation of the prop. I wanted to go a little bit into the aspect of deciding to go with a mandated round, and then also the budget. There's a $20K budget to market the round, and it's open for like over a month. So I just really quickly, before we dive into private voting a little bit more, I wanted to ask about the prop and I guess why you decided to do a mandated round, and then also and Noun 40 if you want to speak on it too, because I know Eli has talked about your contributions to the prop. And also kind of what are the expectations for these teams, and how you're going to be able to get them to apply, and kind of what goes behind that marketing budget, I guess, to get some of those best minds that you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll quickly talk about the marketing budget, and then 40, if you wanna talk about the mandated round or anything else, please take the mic away from me. On marketing, most of the marketing efforts are currently done just by basically reaching out to people in the space and trying to get the attention of various teams. We've also had some organic inbound, actually a lot of it also towards Noun 40, who has been outspoken about it. And the budget itself is just to have it on hand in case we're able to get a plug on popular zero knowledge podcasts or newsletters. So we're working on that, and as stated in the proposal, it's an optional budget. We're not just gonna spend it randomly. We're looking for very targeted exposure. If we can't get it, we're probably just not gonna spend it. The ZK space is not a very big space, so that's why I don't think that a wide marketing net is a great fit here, but rather we're more surgical, and there's basically a few Discords, a few Telegrams, and a few people that if you tap into them, you kind of do the 80-20. So that's currently our take. Of course, any feedback and any support on that are super, super welcome. And in fact, I just had a conversation with with a team that's considering applying today. And one of the beautiful things about this being a mandated round where we're actually going to fund 3 teams is that I can ask a potential team to actually suggest more teams, because it's not necessarily a zero-sum game. So I made the ask, and we'll see what happens there.
Amazing. Oh, go ahead now.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe add a little bit more context about the mandated round approach. So when we were thinking about exploring this avenue, and again, really it's an exploration. It's not that there's anything decided that the DAO would implement private voting, but really there seemed to be some need for it, or at least a quarter of people were expressing difficulty kind of voting honestly because of social pressures. And private voting, or having privacy in how you voted, is often a solution for that problem. Might not be the only solution, but it's a solution that we often use in the real world. So that was a natural avenue to explore. And when we started exploring what's even possible, after maybe a few weeks of talking to people that have thought about this, private voting on chain, there really weren't a clean solution that we felt actually even works. In the way that it has a UX or set of trade-offs that we would think that is suitable for our purpose. So anything that involves an off-chain actor with a centralized kind of tallying scheme would be a non-starter for us, given that we are very much a decentralized DAO. And then the more decentralized schemes were usually either one of two modalities. One is you have to create some sort of pre-commitment before each round. So let's say you put in your kind of some sort of cryptographic input into a hat, let's say, for each round, and then that allows you to become a kind of shielded voter for each prop. That's doable, but then increases kind of the interactivity that's required. There's like a step that you need to do before voting, and getting people to do something is so hard that it will likely result in a very small number of people in a very small anonymity set that makes it really not a thing. And then another solution that was pretty widely discussed is pooling nouns. So rather than kind of doing some sort of cryptographic commitment ahead of each prop, you could ahead of time pool nouns together and kind of make it into, and then that's some sort of smart contract layer that provides that pool, can provide some sort of privacy benefits was the modality, but that also requires locking up nouns and doing things that really most people would not be excited about. So really, outside of those things, there really didn't seem to be something that was viable. And the outcome that we wanted was where people can basically do what they do now, which is there's nothing, you don't have to pool nouns, you don't have to move it to a certain L2 that provide privacy, you don't have to do some step of pre-commitment before a prop happens. You just vote for props the way that you do now, but you have privacy in a decentralized way on chain. That's what we wanted, but that was actually surprisingly difficult. And there were ideas about how you could do it with zero knowledge proofs, but but they were not in a kind of fully fleshed out design way. So many people, if you talk to zero knowledge proof researchers, many thought that we were close to being able to do it, but there weren't any kind of built designs that we could actually use. And at that point, it felt reasonable that we could try to help accelerate this process, because often the researchers don't have, it's not just the funding, but they don't have a clear target as to like, if I did this research, would anyone use it? Does any DAO even really care about this? So it felt both that we could provide a little bit of funding, but also that we could provide a bit of a Schelling point towards telling the world that, hey, there actually is a decentralized DAO on chain that is curious about this. It's not a guarantee that we're saying that we're going to implement it, but there is desire to help see what this would look like, so that we could even have a concrete conversation to decide later on. Because in this kind of abstract form, when we start talking about private voting, what are we even talking about? What types of UXs are possible? What types of decentralization guarantees are possible? What type of privacy gains are possible? Is it just, and can you kind of create different guarantees to reduce abuses, or et cetera, et cetera? So to be able to really, given that it is a nuanced topic, we need to be able to have a concrete conversation. And the lack of real options makes the concrete conversation not possible. So anyways, that's why we felt the mandated round that can kind of bring attention and a lot of to propose different solutions, so that then we can later on, as a community and as DAO, have a conversation would be the best approach. So that's how we ended up going.
Yeah, Al, I saw you on mute, so I didn't know if you wanted to say anything.
Oh, no, that was an accident, my bad.
No, you're totally fine. I just wanted to check. Yeah, no, I think that definitely helps clear up the prop, like, and your guys' thinking behind where this could go. I know that, you know, and then talking about kind of the meta of private voting itself within Nouns, I know that this, you know, as you guys kind of clarified, and with what's in the prop is that it is just like meant to be kind of like public good funding that is to dive into research, and it obviously doesn't mean any implementation within Nouns, but obviously it's being funded by Nouns, and you know no precedent really is set for that, but it will be interesting to see once the teams are funded if there are solutions that that Nouns voters agree with. But I guess what could be a kind of jumping off point from here, now that we've gone through the prop, is talking to Digital Oil and DevCarrot, who I know that Tony brought Digital Oil here because Digital Oil has been a big supporter of private voting, and Carrot is a Nounder, and Nounders were against this specific prop for private voting and against private voting in their reasoning. So I guess we'll jump off by Digital Oil why you support why you support private voting for Nouns. And
maybe it would be
DAO.
better to go to DevCarrot actually first so that we can get an alternate perspective and then come back to Digital actually.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure. Thanks, Digital. First off, thanks to Noun Square and House of Nouns for hosting this, and for everybody, just wanted to shout out. Let's take a moment and realize how cool this is that we're all talking about sort of a decentralized organization, talking about private voting without asking anybody's permission. We're sort of working in parallel, developing all this cool technology, running these experiments, all individually, and how much of a great step forward that is from, technology 5 years ago. So with that in mind, as you mentioned, yes, Nounders voted against for this proposal. I'm speaking personally for myself here, not on behalf of all of the Nounders, so some opinions may vary. What we've switched to is sort of being a little bit more conservative in how we approach projects. And originally, I will admit, I was on board with the funding for public good. I'm a huge proponent of funding for public goods, but there was some discussion that I had heard about, is this, is Nouns where zero knowledge people want to play? And so I haven't quite seen enough information on that to say, is this somewhere where Nouns is going to become a long-term multiplier for these sorts of researchers, or is this something that maybe they come and research, they get some partial proof of concept done, or full proof of concept, and if we don't adopt it, then does that sort of sour that relationship or anything like that? And is it a solid enough target? So that's sort of where my shifting thought on sort of being the place for ZK research is. Then on the other aspect where I was sort of against this proposal, and this is coming from a perspective of a developer of Prop House, someone working with, CDT, building Prop House. I don't know if this works the best as a mandated round. The sort of marketing outreach or marketing discussion said that there was, reaching out to people specifically, lots of organic inbound, and there's no specific allocation, which is totally fine. And I agree that Prop House isn't exactly at the state where it's a job board where people are looking organically. But more specifically, as a mandated round where every Nouner has a vote, I'm interested in zero knowledge. I could probably muddle my way around, assessing teams, but in actuality,
Dev, I think we might have lost you there for a moment. Can we try again?
Uh-oh.
Nope, there you're back.
Can you hear me now?
Lost you for just a second.
Sorry about that.
Yes. No problem.
So anyway, there was a long rambly bit about how I'm not qualified as a Nouner, as someone who would be voting on this round, and I would much more value sort of ELAD, Noun 40 and the rest of the Tech Pod and Soli's judgment on teams. And so that was my pushback on the mandated round. And I think that's sort of that angle. Without rambling for too long.
Interesting. No, that's perfect. I have one question, Christian, if you don't mind me asking. It kind of fits into to what Dev Carrot was just saying. So one question that I had when this round was in voting was, does investing in research for private voting signal a direction for the DAO? And I've heard opinions both ways on this, but essentially if we fund research, which now it seems we will because it has passed, does this now signal to Nouners and to people outside Nouns DAO that Nouns wants private voting? Maybe we'll start with Elad on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious that I think that that's not necessarily the case, but I also understand people who say that they think that is the case. So I find it quite subjective. Personally, I think we can definitely fund ZK research and then decide to not implement it. But then I understand Dev's kind of feedback of, well, if we're not likely, if you hold the position that we're not likely to implement it for our DAO, then maybe we should focus on other public goods where there is better alignment with our actual needs, so that there's just more of a long-term relationship going on there. And I think that's a great point. I guess I'm just a bit more optimistic that there will be a long-term relationship in some way or form. So I view Nouns as a DAO that really enjoys being at the cutting edge of everything. It's part of what makes Nouns, in my opinion. So
I appreciate
it's kind of no, kind of yes.
I appreciate your ability to steelman your own argument in the same sentence. It's a very unique ability that you have, Elad. It's great. Noun 40, I think you were unmuting to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add. Also, even if we don't end up using it in the main DAO, this research can also be used in different layers as well. So let's say in a prop house round, we can choose whether that round is specifically going to be private or public, and we can experiment on that layer with a little bit more flexibility before making something too canonical on the main DAO.
So liquid privacy?
Some notion of that. I mean, also it can be used in Nouns Builder for different DAOs that want to have private voting. So I actually do think that there's many ways in which it can be used, even if the main DAO doesn't end up using it directly, or at least in a near-term time frame. And to the point about, like, is the average Nouner or the average delegate capable of evaluating this prompt? I think it's something worth exploring. And what I mean by that is that, I mean, it was never a foregone conclusion that we could, the wide range of props that even the main DAO goes through, from different type of art things, open source things, software product things, charity, to all sorts of things. We don't have a separate committee that is delegated to evaluate and decide on for each of those categories. And even if it was kind of more optimal in that way, in the sense that maybe a committee that is more expert oriented could generate a output of yes, no's on a set of props in a more clear, optimal fashion, still that likely results in a lot of centralization related trade-offs. How does the committee decide it? How long is now that committee position going to be maintained? Blah, 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 blah. So like we actually thought a fair amount about whether this prop house should be run with some sort of technical committee, like the tech pod decides, or the verb team, and some other nouners that are interested in the subject decides. But ultimately, it's not clear to us where the bounds of the nouner and delegate voting, what range of problems that group can actually handle. And before we see those limits clearly, I think going to some sort of other more centralized modality can be a risk that we might regret for a different reason. So that was partly the reason for going with the format that we did. I do think, though, that maybe for the conversation, future conversation in the session, maybe just discussing private voting and whether that is something that the DAO might want or not might be a more kind of interesting direction that more people might be looking to learn more about outside of kind of the structure of the prop house and the round itself. And also, I'm happy to argue in the direction of private voting not being a good idea, given that maybe some of the speakers might be skewed in one direction. So I think it's really a fascinating conversation or topic that can be argued in both ways. And my intention is mostly that we should have the conversation rather than not. And so, yeah, happy to argue in the direction of keeping voting transparent and public as well.
Yeah, I think like I totally agree. Like, I think on the high level, like that's a good way to steer the conversation. I think on the high level, you guys did a great job in the prop. Eli did a great job in prop of explaining both sides. Digital oil, I saw you on mute, so I would love to hear what your thoughts are on why you support it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I wanted to add before we get into the depths of the whole thing that yeah, my motive. So being, I'll be kind of brief because a lot of what I think has been said, but um, my motivation is that I recently joined Nouns DAO, bought a couple Nouns, fell in love with the project, obviously, and was immediately faced with the task of voting, knowing that at some point I'm going to want to propose something myself, right? And actually, I already have, but I'm going to want to at some point propose something maybe more contentious or more, uh, uh, that yeah, basically more contentious. So uh, my concern is every time I'm voting, I'm feeling social pressure, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Also, I've been through every single prop in the history, one by one, read it, and in my opinion, some props have passed for values that are a bit too high. Some props have passed that I don't understand how they passed so unanimously or near unanimously, and it just going through them created this sensation of, man, there's got to be this really strong social voting quid pro quo effect going on. There's no other explanation, right? And I started speaking with as many people as I could, and most of them had the same feeling. It's just nobody's really saying it out loud. And this wheel kind of keeps on turning, and a lot of really good stuff is coming out of the DAO, and it's the best DAO out there by far for me. But it doesn't mean that we're doing things perfectly. I think that props and treasury use or treasury efficiency can be more optimized. So this is how the idea of private voting at least came into my head, and I said, what if voting was private or optionally private, or some hybrid. um I think uh more efficient props would pass kind of automatically. It would tend towards that, and then I really got interested in the math aspect of it, and um and the fact that maybe Nouns DAO could become the first DAO to show a true proof of concept, and maybe even eventually an implementation of this, and maybe could be even brand private voting as something nounish. And I got excited with that idea as well. So I kind of fell in love with the concept, and putting these two great passions of mine together, and I started going down this rabbit hole. And I do think that, so now getting back to kind of the question that was asked a couple minutes back, I do think it's important that this round passed. Um, and I don't think it would be fair to ask the question, do we want private voting to be a thing in Nouns? And the reason I say this is because I think this prop had to pass in order to gather the information as to what the real constraints are in terms of user experience, what how we can project what the constraints end up being when we arrive at these proof of concepts, and how they project into what could happen to the community based on what the constraints end up being. So in essence, um, we I don't think anybody can reach a decision as to whether it's a good thing or bad thing if we don't understand what the solution looks like. And at this moment, it's a bit too abstract to be able to imagine what the solution actually going to be like from a user experience perspective.
I think that the first part of your answer there kind of went into when we talked about the Nounders vote, which was more than half of the against votes in this prop. The first thing is, that private voting would be detrimental to the culture and brand of Nouns. It's something I also saw in Nounsel. I would love to hear Dev Carrot's perspective. I know that wasn't part of what you shared specifically in your when you were talking about why you ended up being against it, but I would love to know how you think private voting could affect that culture and brand, because Digital Oil talked about kind of the props that have passed in the past, and yeah, I would love to know your perspective on that and where that sentiment kind of comes from.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great point that we are evolving and we want to change how we work and how we find different governance solutions. The ability to go back and look and suss out, the possibility for quid pro quo or proposals that maybe were voted on by a certain subsection that shouldn't have, or were voted against for some sort of retribution, depends on that public accountability and separating the voting from, or shifting the voting from public to private or secret voting really decouples, in my opinion, the public treasury, the public proposals, the public actions from who is making decisions. If we were to, look around at representative democracies, people should know where their stake is and who, if they have a representative like Nounsel or are a sub-DAO, or even if they think that they're, are a fan, we could say, or they're putting their social capital behind somebody, that they're voting the way they say they are. And I think that has a big value versus the gain of maybe some social layer issues of feeling retribution.
That's a really interesting point, Dev Carrot, that I never heard anyone else bring up during this prop, which is the topic of delegates. Because under a regime with private voting, you actually don't even know what your delegate's doing. So you could potentially be delegating 10, 20 nouns to someone, and there's no way to even know if they're serving your own interests, which is interesting. I'd love to know what you think of that, Noun 40.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I think often we think of incomplete binaries when you think about private voting, but the reality is that we could have optional transparency enabled in votes, so that someone can provably say that they voted in a certain direction as if they are shepherding a lot of delegates, and also even and vote reasons and such like that will be possible. And even if it is private, completely, people can kind of share their indications over time and Twitter as well. But the main thing I wanted to say there is that private voting can be implemented in a way where, through norms like Nounsel or somebody that is running as a delegate, say that I will, as a delegate, always vote non-privately because I want to be accountable to the people that are delegating to my vote. So that's something that we can still keep as part of our culture, even in the modality of private voting. But I do agree with the Nounder's view that the culture could meaningfully change. I think the ways in which it will likely change is that, for example, it becomes harder to debug how a outcome happened. So let's say a proposer got narrowly beaten, so it was contentious and their prop didn't go through. And currently what they can do is they can look at all the people that voted against them and reach out to them and try to have a conversation with them to understand why is it that they voted no, and to see if there are ways in which they could create some sort of compromise or accommodate that, and then come back with a concrete proposal again. But that would be less possible in the world of private voting, and would be a meaningful change to how proposers would have to debug the outcome of, let's say, their proposal not going through.
You anticipated my next question there, actually, Now 40, although I wasn't thinking of it from the perspective of a prop having failed and then debugging it, but rather for builders who are actually navigating the process of having a proposal on chain, which could already be difficult and stressful. Imagining that in a world with private voting, where you actually are kind of flying blind at that point. You might as well just go on vacation for 10 days and come back and find out if your prop is passed, because there's really not much you can do in terms of speaking and campaigning, for lack of a better word.
Even on that one, I would challenge that a little bit to say that we could have a form of private voting that has a certain number of midpoint tallies shared. So the simplest thing could be maybe at the midpoint of a proposal, or maybe 3 days before voting is over, maybe the tallies are revealed such that then you can have a sense of how things are going. You still just don't know who exactly voted for what. If it was too frequent, if it's real time, then when a certain number of votes go up, then you can probably tell which group voted in what direction because of the size of those votes. So it can't be real time, but certain amounts of fidelity we play around with. And the second thing is also, I mean, most forms of democratic voting is private voting. Does that make kind of advocacy or political campaigning a non-thing? Like, just because the votes can't be tied to voters doesn't mean that people don't advocate for something that they care about, and try to their very best until the very end of a voting period to influence an outcome. So I think the proposals will still very much have something to do, and will also even have indications along the way of how it's going.
The Noun Square will be setting up exit polls, actually, so that as soon as people vote, we will be reaching out to them to ask how they voted.
There you go. Take advantage of it.
Did you have any other questions, Christian?
Not too much, I guess. I would actually love to hear Digital Oil's response to like the social aspect of it, and kind of what Dev in response to what Dev Carrot said, and hearing about kind of, do you think that there is like a middle ground there, right, where it's like there are both aspects of, some of it's private and some of it's not, potentially, or something along those lines, where it doesn't have to all be, I don't know, like the response was about it not being like quid pro quo voting or anything like that. I guess, do you see a middle ground there where it's not like that, and I guess even without private voting, things are assessed fairly?
Yeah, so I definitely see merit to the counter arguments. Like, yeah, I do see merit to them, but at the same time, have to counterbalance with the value that is being added by eliminating, or at least having the option to eliminate the social pressure aspect of voting, where voting becomes much more pure to what it should be. But it turns out that at a technical level, the lowest hanging fruit solutions are likely going to be solutions where one, vote is this, again, this is low hanging fruit solutions. Vote will be able to be tallied along the way. And this is unless votes go through like a relayer, and it becomes this less trustless, less transparent private voting solution. So votes will be kind of be able to be tallied in the middle, and at the same time, the lowest, another low hanging fruit solution is going to be that you will be able to reveal what you voted if you want, meaning that you might as well just make it optional for people to, like, the protocol itself, the private voting protocol itself, might as well just make it optional for people to make their vote public or private, because it's a much more difficult problem to solve, for the protocol to be such that you cannot reveal your vote even if you want to. So I think that in the end, majority, maybe all solutions will kind of contain those two properties, where you can tally votes within as along the vote goes, and that people can choose to vote either public or private. So we kind of reach this middle ground where where the people that are worried about voting private can vote private, and you also have this mixture of where you don't lose the culture that much that we currently have in the sense that Dev was describing. But at the same time, Actually, I lost my train of thought there. But yeah, I think that that's kind of the way I'm seeing it play out.
Yeah, I think I think that was a good response. Kara, I saw you on mute for a second. I don't know if you wanted to jump in or say anything back.
Yeah, that's certainly interesting. I would be curious to hear sort of the group's thoughts on, in the game theory, does the ability to optionally vote privately solve that, a significant portion of the fearing retribution? I would imagine that if you are voting publicly consistently and then vote privately for a contentious vote, that sort of reduces the set of participants that could be voted against, and so you still have that angle.
Yeah, that's. I'm sorry to jump in again, but that was actually the where I lost my train of thought. I was going to touch upon that exact point, which is that given that most likely votes will be hybrid, meaning you can choose between going public or going private, anonymity set is reduced along the way, and you can think about it a bunch of different ways in which the set is reduced. But yes, you have a situation where somebody thinks they're voting private maybe, and then everybody else chooses to vote public. And if you do know which wallets voted, but not necessarily how that wallet voted, and you're the only wallet stuck left out in the open voting private, then you can just do some simple math and figure out that wallet voted a yes or a no. So it's that's something that we need to think about, and it's one of these multiple dimensions that the problem has, and it's exactly the reason I said it way in the beginning that we can't really decide if we want public or private voting yet, because we don't know what the real constraints are. Nobody has really solved the problem at a Nouns DAO type level, and that's why I think it's so important that this prop pass, because we're going to be able to, at the very minimum, provide this public good. We're going to have these really good outputs, and at the best case, we're going to actually be able to take an informed decision.
I saw that we brought up Panda and Nikki G, and I just wanted to see if you guys had any Lil Panda and Nikki G, and I want to see if you guys had any questions for the speakers up here. Before I had one other thing I wanted to bring up, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to chime in. If not, it's okay too.
Yeah, thanks for hosting. I'd honestly love to hear what I think Noun 40 was about to say something, and I'd give Noun 40 the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, given that we don't have a concrete implementation that we're talking about, I think it could be helpful to kind of bring it at a little bit higher level and say, in what situations would private voting make sense, and in what situations would public voting make sense? And we kind of have the real world to look at to think about these things. And so, for example, in the US, the more kind of large scale, population scale kind of presidential elections were originally public voting, as in you didn't have privacy there. And then we adopted secret voting because of all the kind of abuses related to people bribing to a certain candidate or forcing someone to vote for a certain candidate. And that we felt that created a better situation where most people can vote honestly. But then in representative forms of voting, such as like in the Senate or the House, we vote publicly, as in you can go look online and see for a given proposition how your given senator voted or did yay or nay for like everything. And so even in the off-chain world, it is not one or the other. And we think that the right thing is different depending on different types of situations. And it seems more like when it is a larger scale kind of each person has less of a ownership of the outcome or incentive to really feel like their vote can really they don't feel a sense of kind of a strong ability to influence it, and yet someone will give you $10 or $100 if you vote in a certain direction, and there's much more possibility of abuse. But in the other case of whether you have large stakeholders or you have representatives that are representing a large group of people, then we feel that them being accountable or not being able to kind of play different sorts of shenanigans are more important than their being able to just vote kind of purely honestly, whatever theoretically honestly might mean there. So I think it's kind of a question about what we think nouns is closer to, and also that there might be a modality of private voting that kind of caters to both situations, because again, we have a wider design space than what's normally possible. So, for example, I think both the points that Deb Carrot brought up about delegates and large groups, and for example, Wales, I think are kind of similar to that. And the example that the Digital Oil brought up of like a builder that has like 2 or 3 nouns, I think both of those are actually valid points, and it actually represent different vantage points. The builder that has 1 or 2 nouns has a lot more to care about how their prop that they're going to put up a week or month later is received, and not making any enemies or not kind of causing anyone to vote against them in the future. Matters so much more to them, because their voting honestly, theoretically doesn't really impact likely the probability of a vote passing or not passing, and they only strictly experience a loss, as opposed to a larger whale could actually vote, sway the outcome, so they might care about the outcome more, and they have a large financial stake. Or if they're a kind of a big group, then they have a kind of responsibility, et cetera, and it creates different dynamics. So I think it's kind of worth thinking about in different stakeholders, even within the voting population within nouns, and that we might they might have different things and that we want to consider and optimize towards.
And even on noun 40, even a simple case that really applies to everybody, which is you are sitting in a meeting, watching another nouner's face, speaking about maybe like a particular prop or whatever the day before, and then you have to vote on his prop or his or her prop the next day. What do you do? And he or she's going to see what you voted, and you were just with him the day before. And yeah, it sounds kind of childish, but I believe every single person, no matter 1, 2, or whale, has felt this kind of pressure. And really, what you want to do is you want to vote truly to what you believe, without thinking of any of that stuff.
I agree with both previous speakers on that point. Sort of, if we wind the clock forward, 30 years, and we're sort of still just getting started on the Nouns DAO journey. It would be a terrible waste. It would make me sad if everybody was still feeling that pressure. As long as we're still moving in that direction of building a more comfortable and honest organization, that would be great. One thing that I like to sort of fall back into with framing is that the base currency, if you will, within the Nouns DAO and the Nounish community at large, to me is social currency, which sounds really think PC and yada yada, but the basis is that if we can all be honest with each other, if we can do things and show, again, think PC meritocracy angle of, I'm going to be honest with you, my fellow Nouner, you, my fellow Nounish community person, then you can in turn trust me. Even if we don't meet together on this proposal, 20 years from now, we'll still be part of an interesting org. So I don't want to make anybody think that I'm against sort of emotional safety and those kinds of things, but I'm very glad we're having this discussion, and agree with Digital Oil that it's hard to make a full judgment because we're not sure what it looks like.
It's hard. I feel like it's hard to say honestly, I think everyone here outside of me can speak better on this, but it's hard to say if that's if many people are voting that way now, right? Like, I think that often that's just the like Digital Oil said, that's just the reality of it. But I like you see someone around it and you're going to vote for them. But I think that there's a middle ground where people can kind of get feedback on props, come back and circle around. But when you just vote no, it does, you kind of make enemies, but it's not kind of necessarily what it's meant to be. I don't know, but I like I said,
Well,
anyone else
part of the
can share
problem
perspectives there.
part of the problem with what digital oil is talking about is that it may not even be something you consciously do as a voter. It might be just something that you unconsciously are swayed to vote a certain way because you're expecting someone else to do something else. And that's just kind of human nature. But I really appreciate what Dev Carrot said, though, about if we build a community where we can trust each other, then a lot of that hopefully doesn't matter as much as it would otherwise. We are running up on the hour. We do have a hard stop at 6 p.m., but Low Panda has a question. Maybe we can close with that. Little Panda, did you have a question?
Yes. Thank you for hosting. I'll be real quick. Really appreciated this conversation. And I understand this mandated round to be funding proposals to enable this new private voting. But I wonder if anyone in the Nouniverse is looking at private voting as a new attack vector that potentially opens up new social attacks against the protocol. Be interested to hear if anyone's working on that. Thank you.
That might be a good one for. Yeah, go ahead now, 40. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I think a lot might have views here as well, but I just wanted to kind of second that and say, if I was voting against private implementation of private voting in the future, one of the most likely reasons would be what was just referenced, which is there are unknowns that we don't understand about what could go wrong with DAO governance in general. Really, Nouns DAO is, I might argue, one of the first kind of really decentralized, multi-stakeholder, multi-party kind of meaningful size DAO that has real consequences and it's playing over a long time. And so we're mostly exploring kind of the what can happen in this type of governance space as we're experiencing it. And we only know one kind of modality, which is public voting, and that involves some amount of traceability and that involves some amount of shaming. Even if anonymous, still anonymous people have identities, and kind of being able to shame those anonymous identities as part of the design space that we operate in. And so we actually don't know what can go wrong if you remove that, because there aren't other DAOs of our scale that has explored that meaningfully. So then what that means is something could go wrong, and we quite don't know what they are. So if we know all the modalities in which something can go wrong, then we can mitigate them probably. Like, oh, we should open up the tally at like one day before so that blah, blah, blah. Or like, oh, we should be able to auto extend the voting period automatically if these conditions even are hit, even if tallies aren't revealed, and we can kind of like mitigate those failure modes. But given we don't quite know what all the failure modes are in the mode in the realm of private voting, because that doesn't exist, then it does give me some amount of anxiety of we could have a big failure of where we just don't know. We do anticipate.
I feel like a lot of the teams that are funded are going to have to like think through a lot of these problems and really get into those like finer details. And I think that even us might not have the best, all of the information that we could possibly be working with, as you guys have said before. Tony, can we go to Nikki real quick?
Yeah, we can. Before we do that, though, I just wanted to add to Noun 42. I had the thought when he was speaking that another problem might be that it may be hard to reverse things if we do find out that making it private was a problem, and then that's a vector of attack. How do you, as a DAO that's decentralized, fix that problem if the problem itself is in the voting layer? Is that a valid concern for you? Or?
Absolutely.
Nikki G, we have time for one more quick question. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, yep. I just got in my car. I've literally been listening in while I was in physiotherapy for the last hour. I really wanted to chat, but I couldn't. But I know we have limited time, which sucks because I have some very awesome, I think awesome opinions on this. But I will say, I really appreciate listening to the comments that everybody had. I think it's such a super, super important topic because being a newer person to the DAO and understanding that there's a lot of quickly understanding there's a lot more political kind of pieces in play that you really have to consider if you want to be a builder. There's not just having good ideas, bringing them to the DAO, and measuring impact. It's a lot more political than that, and it was something that threw me off guard at first, but I really like the whole conversation around it, and I appreciate you guys sharing all your thoughts. I mean, I would love to talk a little bit more on another time if it's available, but yeah.
Thanks, Nikki. Maybe in closing, if we could just go to Elad, and Elad, if you could just tell us what to expect from the prop now that it's passing, and what we'll see coming down the line on that.
Sure. So on February 6th, the application window opens. There's a 1-month window for teams to apply. On March 6th, that window closes, and we enter roughly 2 weeks of voting time. That's when David and I, at least, are going to be spending a lot of time going through those proposals and trying to help voters make sense of things as much as we can. And probably we're going to have a bunch of discussions around that time too, maybe here as well. And once the voting is in, we fund the teams. Now, it's important to highlight that we only fund teams that pass a certain quorum. So I don't think that's been done on Prop House before, but spoke to Seneca about it, and we're going to make it happen. There's a quorum of 300 Prop House votes each team must pass in order to qualify for funding. So we could potentially fund less than 3 teams. Yeah. So we will. This is kind of our way to mitigate some of the risk of forcefully funding subpar proposals with the main kind of Prop House mantra of we're going to spend the money we put on the table. So that's going to require some quorum. So up to 3 teams get funded, and we plan to support them along the way as much as possible with friends from outside and any kind of support that we can provide in terms of what the DAO wants, what the DAO needs, how the DAO works. We're going to steward those teams towards success. And again, expect a lot of hype around it. Like, I imagine bringing the teams on to this forum as well for Q&As and for feedbacks, and to just create a lot of energy and to make those teams feel super welcome in our universe. And just want to say in closing that everything that has been said here, all the concerns, all the questions, so wonderful to put these things out in the open. And certainly there's no clear-cut view on this matter. There's a lot to be explored here socially and technically and from a security standpoint. And it's part of why I'm excited about this. We have a lot of stuff to think about and do together here, and just a fascinating field. So I'm grateful for this discussion and looking forward to several more along the way.
Thank you so much.
Definitely got to be something you send to the people who submit. Thank you to everyone. I just want to shout out Tody for putting all this all together, and the Nouns Square for being the place that conversations like this can happen. It's really the only place. It's really so cool that everyone got here to discuss this, and the people who submit the Prop House round can come back and listen to this community talk about this problem and the possible outcome. So anyways, Tody, wrap it up. Thank you so much for the space.
Well, and I'll throw the flowers right back, because I appreciate you taking the initiative on this and reaching out to Elad, and Elad for being super flexible about timing. Same thing with Noun 40. And it's a difficult week for some reason. A lot of people are on holiday, so I appreciate all 5 of the panelists for taking the time to be here and chat with us today. Just in closing, I wanted to mention that we've got a few shows coming up on TNS. Wanted to run through those quickly for you so you know what we've got coming up on the Soapbox. At 8 p.m. tonight, we have the very first Little Toads Tuesday. There's a new DAO called Little Toads that was launched on Nouns Builder last week, and they're having their inaugural Soapbox tonight at 8 p.m. So definitely come through. They're going to be giving away a Little Toad as a prize. NARS DAO has their daily drop at 9:30 p.m. EST, where they do finish the auction essentially for their That's Gnarly for the day. And 9 o'clock live is currently falling around 5 a.m. Lucky us. So 5 a.m. EST tomorrow. We'll be back here on this Spaces talking to Numo Zero on 9 o'clock live at the Noun Square. Tomorrow, we've got a few soapboxes lined up at 10:30 a.m. EST. We have Nouns DAO Japan English Radio. So if you want to hear about everything that's going on with Nouns in Japan, that's the place to be. And then we've got 7 o'clock p.m. Nouns DAO Amigos. Seems to be quite an international day on TNS on Wednesdays. Nouns DAO Amigos, the space completely in Spanish at 7 p.m. tomorrow. Food Noun O'Clock at 8 p.m. where they chat about all things food nouns. And then, of course, the Daily Drop with That's Gnarly again at 9:30 p.m. That's what's coming up in the next 24 hours on TNS. And the last thing I'd like to leave you with is I've just pinned above a draft of our new TNS prop. We're asking for an extension for 6 months to keep doing what we're doing here. We're especially proud of our commitment to build revenue of 50 ETH over the course of those 6 months to defray the operations costs of doing what we do here. It is a pretty comprehensive prop, but I'd appreciate if anyone listening could give it a quick review. We have it up on Brian's address board as an alternative to Discourse. We figured if we're going to call it a Discourse killer, we better give it a so it's up there. Anybody can connect their wallet and comment, and we appreciate any and all feedback as we plan to go on chain this week. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you next time.